OPB Podcasts.
From the Gert Boyle studio, it's OPB Politics Now for Thursday, September 4th. The special session that was supposed to funnel billions of dollars into the state's roads and prevent hundreds of layoffs at the Oregon Department of Transportation, well, similar to a crumbling bridge, it fell apart. Democratic state lawmakers said they will be back later this month to pass a transportation package because despite holding supermajorities in both chambers, this has yet to happen. We are here to explain the politics, and this week, there are plenty. I'm OPB Politics reporter Lauren Dake.
And I'm OPB Politics reporter Dirk VanderHart.
Dirk, before we start, just a note that we are live on opb.org and our YouTube page. So if you have a question about the session, we can try to answer them as we go. We were here, Dirk, just you and me, just last week in these very seats talking about the way special sessions are supposed to work. And I'll just remind people how they're supposed to go. Okay, so usually policy details have been worked out and negotiated and agreed upon. Caucus leaders know where their members are located. The votes have been whipped. Lawmakers travel back to Salem. They vote on what they're supposed to vote on, and then they go home. But from the beginning, on Friday morning, this is not how this special session went.
It really isn't. No. Friday, the Senate gavelled in first, sort of as a formality. Everyone was there, but Democrats still didn't have enough votes to pass the rules. That was an early sign that everything was not quite as it should be or normally is. And then at 11, things got even more interesting. It became clear right as the House was set to, gavel in the session that something was wrong. There weren't enough people for them to actually conduct business. So initially, this seemed like a fluke. I heard from a Dem, Representative Andrea Valderrama. She was supposed to come in earlier today or last night, but her flight got canceled. So suddenly us Democrats might not have enough people. Maybe there won't be enough folks to conduct business. But it was more than that, actually, it turns out. So quick House math. Democrats have 36 members. The House needs 40 people, 2/3 to conduct business. And soon it became clear as the afternoon sort of dragged on with no quorum, even when Valderrama arrived, even with Representative Hua Win, who, remember, has been gone for much of the year because she's battling cancer, even with her in the building, there were not enough Republicans on hand to grant the Democrats a quorum. So we waited. At one point, someone in the gallery threw a big handful of foam clown noses down onto the chamber floor, which is frowned upon, I have to say. On one level, though, understandable. It was a rolling drunk show.
So right away, sort of similar to that decrepit old pickup that you're trying to sell right now on Facebook Marketplace, things start to break down. Friday night, the House adjourns without doing anything. Saturday, still nothing. Yep. Dirk, I think you were trying to potty train your son this weekend. It seems like between that and legislative misfires, you had kind of a crappy weekend.
Well, first of all, let me just say my pickup is excellent. It's getting a lot of interest, as you know, and it runs well. I think it's fair to say my weekend involved excrement, both literal and figurative.
All right. So tell us precisely what the holdup was. Was this a misunderstanding? Was this a little mini walkout?
It's been really hard to put a finger on it. No one is quite labeling this, right? So on one hand, Democrats have not lashed out at Republicans in the way we're used to when they walk out and they put out these press releases. They say, you're not doing your job. You're sort of abandoning your constitutional obligations. They haven't labeled this a walkout or a quorum denial in that way. And the message from Republicans has really been, we did what we said we were going to do. We provided the 4 people that technically are needed from our side for a quorum if all your members are there. But that's really strange for a couple of reasons. The big one being that Democrats, even if Andrea Valderrama hadn't had this flight difficulty, they knew they were going to be a member short. State Representative Nathan Sosa was out of the country. He was never going to be available on that Friday, not until Monday. And so the big question here seems to be, did House Republican leader Christine Drazan break some sort of word, or did did the House Speaker, Julie Fahey, just not do the math right? You know, Republicans are saying we only ever guaranteed you 4 for a quorum. Democrats always knew they'd be 1 short. What exactly is this? I don't really know. And frankly, the parties aren't saying a lot about it. But what is clear is that Republicans did have more members ready when they felt it would be to their advantage. They spent all day sort of haggling, negotiating. Eventually, there was some deal made that they would open up this package and start haggling over pieces of it. And at that point, 2 more Republicans show up. Suddenly at 8:18 p.m. on Friday, the House has a quorum and we're suddenly in business.
So if this is a strategy by the Republicans, it works because they managed to win some concessions from the Democrats.
Yeah, they do. The next day, or I guess on Sunday, when a committee meets, they take up a number of amendments that actually reduce the scope and cost of this bill. The big one is Democrats wanted to double this payroll tax that all of us Oregon workers pay to pay for public transit. They wanted to do that indefinitely. Republicans want a concession that says, nope, that's only going to be for 2 years. And that really actually reduced the spend on this bill quite a bit.
So Monday, finally, they passed the package, but it's a pretty slimmed down version of this package.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, they reduced the payroll tax to just 2 years. They have this provision in there that says DAS can't raise your gas taxes. That's a little bit wonky. But we had been expecting, I believe, a $5.8 billion package over a year. This is 4.3. It still contains a lot of the things, though, that you are used to, that we have talked about a lot. I mean, a 6-cent gas tax increase, increases to registration and titling fees, right? In many cases, those would double or even more under this. A provision that will require EV drivers and drivers of hybrids to sign up for this state program where they pay per mile. All told, as I said, that's about $4.3 billion over a decade. And it's got this other stuff, too, that we know about, right? Like the freight industry wanted more simple and slightly adjusted means of taxing their industry. They got that, something they'd sought for decades, I believe. Some other things around accountability and audits. I mean, it's a big package still. It's a lot less, though, than what Democrats have been talking about for most of this year.
There were 2 votes, I think, that were particularly noteworthy. Basically, 2 members of the House, 1 Democrat and 1 Republican, did not vote along party lines. First, tell me about the Democrat vote.
Yeah. I mean, let's just say this vote passed the House on Monday by the bare majority. It needs 3/5 of members. It got exactly that 36. And that's because 1 Democrat defected and 1 Republican crossed the aisle. So the Democrat is Representative Vanessa Hartman. She's from Gladstone. She represents a pretty interesting district, and she sort of went over this on the House floor. It's sort of at the nexus of all these state highways. Her constituents are always dealing with ODOT and various facets for these projects. And very notably, this is an area that would have been super impacted if the state had moved forward with tolling on Portland area interstates as was planned. They would have, probably been paying a lot to use the interstates, but also may have seen spill over when people were trying to avoid tolls. Their streets might have been really impacted. So she's dealt with this a lot. And she said she has talked to constituents a lot about the things they're really sick of and whether or not they would support, raising their taxes to support ODOT. Here's what she said she heard from folks.
Whether someone was a neighbor, a business owner, a teacher, an elected official, the top line message was that they are fed up with the consistent issues that ODOT has put upon them over the years. They are fed up with the first answer to our problems is always increasing costs for working families. They are fed up with poor project management, and they are frustrated with the lack of oversight and accountability.
Lauren, this was not entirely unexpected. You'll remember during the session at one point when Democrats were taking on or proposing a far larger transportation package, Hartman actually took to Instagram at one point and said she was very upset over some dynamics, but said basically they were proposing insane tax increases. I mean, something you didn't hear from a lot of rank and file Dems. She has been out in front of being sort of critical of this idea.
Okay, and remind us about the Republican who bucked his party.
Yeah. This is Representative Cyrus Javity, Republican from Tillamook. This was a little more interesting, I think, just the fallout. So he has been a maverick all year, really. Javity voted with Democrats on key bills, including that contentious bill, you'll remember, that makes it more difficult to enact book bans in schools, right? This sort of cultural battleground that we are seeing more and more. But Javity writes really prolifically, actually, on this Substack. I think it's a Substack that he has. And he had made pretty clear on that blog, basically, that he was thinking about voting yes on this. And he said during the floor, that ultimately came down to concerns that the state is going to be, and roads really, are going to be far less safe if these service reductions we've been talking about. You said up top, hundreds of people laid off at ODOT. It's like 10% of their workforce, a whole suite of services scaled back. He thinks we Oregonians would just be too unsafe if that were allowed to happen. Here is how he put it.
If we fail to act, in my district, the Youngs Bay Bridge in Astoria may not open for the fishing fleet. Snow in Astoria won't be cleared until the sun decides to do the job. A blown-out culvert in Tillamook will mean an EMS crew takes 90 minutes instead of 20 to reach a patient.
And he kept going. And as I said, the effect is Hartman votes no, Javity votes yes. Dems, I think as they knew would happen, have exactly the 36 votes to pass it through the House.
And you touched upon this, but they have both received some political backlash.
Yeah, I mean, really, Javity is the big one. I think it will be very interesting on Hartman's side to see how this works. I think clearly she probably took a vote that many of her constituents will appreciate. Who will not probably appreciate it are the labor unions. SEIU Local 503 specifically, which has a lot of members at ODOT, really is pushing this, and so maybe not be as favorable to her come election time. Javity, the impact has been far, far more pronounced. Conservative social media circles, even some of his colleagues in the House, have really railed against that vote since it happened. And it was also very clear that this is exactly what Javity was expecting. He is not caught off guard here. Here is what he sort of explained his life had looked like in the run-up to the vote.
I've received a lot of phone calls, sometimes at 10 o'clock at night, from people I have never met in my life, asking me to vote no and threatening me that I will lose my job if I dare vote yes. And to them I say, I think my job's worth the handful of jobs it's going to save up in Astoria if it comes down to that, or the hundreds more that it will save across the state.
So very upfront there. Yeah. Like, I am willing to lose my job over this. If this is so politically unpopular in my district and a Republican wants to try to primary me, maybe that happens. And, really all year this is bubbling, but I think since this vote, we have seen more and more parallels drawn between Cyrus Javity and a representative you probably remember, Charlie Conrad, who was a Lane County Republican. In 2023, he bucked his party by voting with Democrats on this bill that, among other things, would have expanded access to transgender care. And he had this, very much like Javity, this very principled speech on the House floor about how he'd done research. He'd spoken with medical experts. He'd really tried to look into this, and he had come to the conclusion that this was the right thing. Not something we see a lot in Salem. And Conrad ended up having to leave the Republican Party because they weren't going to support them. He had sort of had this rift, ran as an independent, lost. He is no longer in the legislature. I think a lot of people are wondering if Cyrus Javity is going to have a similar political story here.
Right. Okay. Well, the House passes it, but it is a far cry, certainly, from the more ambitious package that they considered during the long 6-month legislative session. And then they made those additional concessions to Republicans over the weekend to get it through the House. It still raises taxes. It still raises revenue, to your point, something like $4.3 billion in the first decade. But just sort of quickly break down what is in the remaining policy package for us.
Yeah, I mean, so I think I went through all of it, but I think it is worth noting that how different this is from what happened or what was presented during the session. So that was I think an $11.8 billion over a decade package. They were talking about 12 or 15 cent increases. They were talking about higher taxes on car sales, and they were doing things that I think a lot of lawmakers still think are necessary, including funding Safe Routes to Schools program, funding these highway mega projects like the I-5 Rose Quarter that currently have huge funding holes. So we are really talking about what a lot of people say. I think we talked about this last week, Lauren, but a lot of people say as a Band-Aid, $4.3 billion over a decade is something that a lot of folks think we are still going to have to keep talking about more revenue for ODOT. And, hard to imagine that that's going to be super popular with Oregonians, but we will see.
More transportation podcasts in our future, Dirk.
Yes, I love them.
So it passes the House. The governor is sort of telegraphing that the bill should be essentially smooth sailing in the Senate. That's what everybody is expecting, and that is not what happens.
I mean, the governor has been telegraphing a lot. She said we would have a quorum in the run-up to this. She said she expected it. Clearly, that wasn't the case. Again, we haven't seen her throwing many elbows about that publicly. And that is certainly not what happens in the Senate. So I started actually hearing Friday, shortly after lawmakers gavelled in, that there might be a problem in the Senate. There was rumblings that Senator Chris Gorsuch, he's from Gresham, he's a Democrat, had some health issues. It wasn't totally clear what it was. I would reach out to Democrats over the course of the weekend and consistently got the message that we believe we have this. We think there will be 18 votes in the Senate when it comes to it on Wednesday. Maybe we'll have to delay until Thursday, but we think we got it. And on Tuesday, it became clear that was not the case. I mean, there was just more and more rumblings that Gorsuch was maybe just out of it more than people thought. He wasn't going to be in any way, shape, or form able to come to the Capitol. And so that created the situation where on Tuesday evening, we learned, no, we're not going to push back this vote a couple days. We're going to push this vote back 2 weeks because Gorsuch, as it turns out, is a necessary 18th vote on the floor of the Senate to get this thing passed.
And certainly health complications, can be unpredictable. I think what is noteworthy, though, is how tight the Democrats' margins are here. And presumably they were trying to twist some Republican arms behind the scenes while all of this was playing out.
I believe that's the case. Yeah, and we've said it a lot. Like, Dems have 3/5 supermajorities in both chambers. It's exactly the number of votes you need to pass a tax. So it was always going to be tight. They haven't really brought many Republicans on board with them. I think you're right, Lauren. I mean, I think there was a concerted effort behind the scenes to make the case maybe to some R's who, like, say, a Suzanne Weber, she can't run again because she walked out in 2023. Maybe make the case that, hey, this is a special consideration out of goodwill toward Gorsuch. Maybe you just vote for this thing. We get it through and we don't have to go through this whole rigmarole. I don't think that was successful. I think that's a big ask to make of any Republican on a tax vote that may define their political legacy. And so was a non-starter. But yeah, everything. It looks like now the Ds are just going to rely on their Senate Democrats to get this through. And that includes, by the way, Senator Mark Meek, who, as you remember, was the sort of person that blocked this the transportation package during the session because he had concerns about price tags and concerns about tolls. They've tried to address some of those tolling concerns with this.
So now they're coming back September 17th. What happens if Senator Gorsuch is still unable to make it to the Senate floor?
I think that we'd probably see more delay. I mean, my guess is they set it 2 weeks out because they expect, and Gorsuch is saying, and his doctors are saying, he should be in an okay place by then. If not, though, I mean, Kotek has said she needs this done. Democratic leadership has said they want to do this, and they are going to wait for their 18th vote. That is every indication we have at this point.
During the regular session, the governor got quite a bit of criticism for not being really involved in negotiating the transportation package up until the last moment.
Right.
She became very involved after the session, working out the policy details of the current proposal. Now she's sort of under fire once again for not being present in Salem this weekend. I mean, where was she?
Well, that is a very good question, and one that Republicans have asked. I mean, let's just think about how this played out, right? The transportation package fails. She shows up on the last day of session, as you said, makes a forceful case for this very small bill to sort of stop the bloodletting. That doesn't work. Then she holds a press conference the next day and says, I don't care about people's vacation. I don't care where you want to be. I'm calling you in at some point, and we're going to do this. You're going to be seeing a lot of me, I believe was her exact quote. So a lot of people took note when on Sunday, when there was this committee hearing, the governor actually didn't show up to say, here's the bill I'm putting forward, everybody. Here's why I want you to do it. She sent an emissary. Very quickly, there was speculation because of some photo that emerged. I will be clear, I do not know its provenance or where it came from, that the governor was out in Astoria somewhere, like shopping. Someone had seen her out in Astoria. And so, Senate Minority Leader Daniel Bonham says, where's the governor? Her office steadfastly refuses to say anything about where she was at the time. We asked that day, they wouldn't say. We asked this week, they still won't say where she was because they are chalking it up to a security concern. What they have said is the governor was not on vacation. They say she canceled a Labor Day weekend vacation for this and that she was monitoring things very closely. They would also say, I think, that she doesn't typically show up for, bill hearings. Even her bills, she will often send a policy expert. I think this is a little different. When you have made such a big deal about calling people in on a holiday weekend and ensuring that you're working all the time and they need to be working, it just, I was surprised not to see her there.
And so much about politics is about optics, how things look. And it seems like this doesn't really look that good. Presumably, Governor Tina Kotek is going to seek re-election. How do you think this would play out for her?
I mean, presumably she seeks re-election. Presumably she cruises through the primary in May. So we are really talking about a race that would play out in November, more than a year from now. Are people going to remember that Tina Kotek did not show up for a hearing on this tax bill then? I'm sure Republicans will raise it. Do they care? No. Maybe far more salient, though, for voters is the fact that Tina Kotek passed a tax bill. That is something we can be sure we will be hearing a lot about, and especially if there is a successful referendum, if this thing's passed, and voters are going to decide whether this gas tax increase lives or dies on the same ballot. I think these issues will be very, very front and center.
Dirk, it is always a pleasure to hear from you.
My gosh, this was so fun. Thanks, Lauren.
Let's leave it here today. Thanks for joining me. This week's episode of OPB Politics Now was recorded live in the Gert Boyle studio. It was produced by Andrew Thien. Our audio engineer is Naleen Silva, and our music comes from Audio Network. In these uncertain times, we are certain you have questions about local politics. Maybe we can answer them. We would love to hear from you. Please email us at opbpoliticsnow@opb.org. We will be back next week. Until then, thank you for your support and thank you for listening.